Just a quick note, for much of the duration of this, I refer to the actor Kenneth Ives, who plays Dominator Toba, in the present tense. Kenneth sadly died after I'd recorded the first couple of episodes of this story for Happy Times and Places, passing away at home at the age of 87. So R.I.P. to Kenneth, who was a fine actor and a brilliant television director. Yay, it's Happy Times and Places, an attempt to be cheerful about Doctor Who, even the Dominators, by doing an episode commentary, accentuating the positive, and trying to guess what my special guest's favourite things about each episode are.
So, I'm Andrew Smith, I'm a writer, and in relation to Doctor Who, I wrote Full Circle, a TV series for Tom Baker in his last year as the Doctor, and for the last 10 years plus I've contributed several stories to the Big Finish audio ranges for Doctor Who and other titles. And so Toby, for my contribution to this excellent series of yours, I selected The Dominators. I'm well aware it's not the most loved of Doctor Who stories. And I don't know if I'd defend it as a great story. I don't think I would. But I love it, and I love it because I remember watching it as a 6-year-old. It's one of my earliest Doctor Who memories. And I even remember having a dream, or even a nightmare at the time, because I was 6 years old, in which there was like a cliff edge and a line of quarks were coming over the cliff edge, appearing there. And it's burnt into my memory. And I had no idea years and years ago that the story still existed. So when it was released on VHS, I remember being very excited. And then watching the video and then seeing that thing I remembered from my dream or nightmare was actually something I picked up from the TV show, because it actually appears in the show with the quarks appearing over the cliff edge. So this sets off a real chemical reaction in my brain. So I'm sat here now in my front room, and I am now about to watch episode 1. And I shall, at the end of episode 1, I shall pick out my favourite thing, as I'm required to do. And I'll see how that goes. Happily, I'm not watching this just to contribute to your podcast, Toby, but also as research for a story in a range that I'm script editing for Big Finish at the minute. So it's a win-win, really. But anyway, let's have a look at episode 1 of The Dominators. And I don't know about anyone else, but I, for one, am really looking forward to this, and I hope you enjoy it, mate. Cheers.
Well, everybody, how exciting is this? Welcome to Happy Times and Places. And I'm very happy that our special guest this time around is Andrew Smith, writer of Full Circle, a bona fide Doctor Who writer. He's canon! And the canon fodder that he has selected for this podcast is, as he says, nobody's favourite story, and certainly not one of mine, I have to say, The Dominators. And I'm a big Patrick Troughton fan. So let's see what we can come up with for this tale. But how exciting to have Andrew as part of it. I mean, I remember watching Full Circle as a kid. Season 18 is one of my earliest memories. I remember bits of 16, mostly repeats, I think. A lot of 17, but then, I mean, I remember all of 18. I remember where I was when a lot of those episodes were on. So I even had to go to somebody else's house to watch episode 2 of Full Circle, because I had missed it for a school thing or a party or something. But it was the early days of videotape, and somebody we knew had a video, and they videoed it for me. So after school one day, I went to theirs to watch the episode that I'd missed. How exciting, those sorts of days. The idea of having a 60s episode on videotape was out of this world at this point. And now here I have it on a thing that we couldn't have even conceived, where the videotape is been reduced to tiny little pixels, or the pictures on the videotape have been reduced to tiny little pixels and stored in a box, a Brit box. I do have this on DVD, but for convenience sake, because I get better sound, I get sound out of the speakers attached to the internet that I don't if I play a disc. Anyway, you don't need to know that. So I'm going to watch it on a lovely big screen, which I've never done. And I am going to press play on The Dominators. Patrick Troughton's 5-part story, The Dominators, is going to begin in 3, 2. Have I pressed play? Have I pressed record? Yes, I have. I wasn't sure if I'd done that or not. In 3, 2, 1. And it's taking a while to load. You know, Alexa, volume 6. You can tell that this is live. It's not live by the time. Alexa, volume 6. So this was the earliest for me. Alexa, volume 5. I'm so sorry. This is the earliest for me. Patrick Troughton solely full story. For when I was a time tot, I mean, there were, in fact, more episodes of this existed than I think existed of the whole of season 5 or the whole of Patrick Troughton's contribution to season 4. We had episode 3 of The Underwater Menace, 1 of The Faceless Ones. Oh, and the 2 of The Moon Base. That was it. And another one came back of The Faceless Ones. Now, these... This spaceship thing, I seem to recall there's lots of different fades between the pictures. There's no attempt to sort of marry it up and go, this is one continuous shot. And I remember they do that with the TARDIS, don't they? With Fury of the Deep, we see it spinning, and then it fades to the next picture. And it's like, well, we can't do that, so we just do this. I'm not sure that's tolerable to today's eyes. I think we need a bit more of an attempt to either disguise that or to do one continuous shot. But it's interesting that it happens a couple of times in quick succession. Now, here is, in my recall, the best thing about The Dominators, straight off the bat, and it's Ronald Allen as a rather sort of cadaverous creature that he is. I think he's got a great sort of undead alien thing going on about him, and a suppressed cruelty, and it's a sort of gruesome and alien performance. And no disrespect to Kenneth Ives, who does a very good job too, but I think there's a slight added alienness to what Ronald Allen does, and I think he's super duper. And I remember when Ronald Allen died, because he'd been in Crossroads. There was a sort of suggestion, there was a sort of damned with faint praise of Ricardo. I remember Mum saying, yeah, they were kind of saying he wasn't that great an actor, and I think, because he was famous for Crossroads, there was a certain sort of the coverage was slightly patronising, and he'd sent himself up a little bit in the comic strip Presents, where he played Uncle Quentin in the famous 5 spoofs. And of course, if you send yourself up, that then gives people license to do it as well. That was a very interesting segue from the sort of smoky mountain model. I actually thought because BritBox occasionally slows down and I thought, oh, is this slowed down? No, it's again a funny kind of segue from that to then a new model shot to now we're on film here with this wonderful cast here of we have Cully, played by Arthur Cox, often criticised this casting for casting a middle-aged man as a young rebellious youth, and Arthur Cox is not a middle-aged man in this. It's just the olden days where he's slightly balding and portly, but that's young people could be that. and his two of his three mates are played by actors, seeing as these are short-lived characters, actors with a great future. Wahed is played by Philip Voss, who's already been in Doctor Who and Marco Polo as Akamat, but went on to be a leading player at the Royal Shakespeare Company. Played Shylock at the Royal Shakespeare Company, but did some great theatre work, as well as some telly as well. But he's a marvellous classical actor, Philip Voss, who only died last year, as I record this, of COVID, sadly. He'd retired pretty much. I interviewed him a couple of times. He was a delightful man. He was very theatrical and good luck with the project, he said to me, I recall. And I remember we did a thing. He was in an episode of Out of the Unknown, playing a very small part, but he came in and did the commentary for us for the BFI, which nobody got paid for. And he said, and you know, people had to introduce themselves and go, you know, my name's Jim Magoo. I played the leading role of Stingidibidi. And Philip Voss went, my name is Philip Voss, and I played a policeman. And it's very sort of Nicholas Craig, the actor. I loved it. I really liked Philip Voss. And again, the fact that he was a man of such illustrious theatrical pedigree, but he was happy to come in and chat about a sort of one scene part in a thing. And he let me interview him for Who's Round over the phone. Delightful, really liked him. And what a great career. And I think he's excellent in this. In fact, I remember when I was running through corridors with Rob Shearman, because Rob goes first, and in that we have to say what we like about the episode. And Rob wrote his entire essay about Philip Voss because he's so good. He's although he's got this very pronounced RP, it's a very naturalistic performance, and it's got lots of little, just the way he's sort of leaning slightly and playing with his pencil. It's just slightly more modern than a lot of the acting, certainly in sort of smaller parts that you get in Doctor Who around this time. And the man in the dress is Malcolm Terrace, another actor I was surprised to learn had been in Doctor Who, because he was in television a lot when I was younger, and he was sort of ruddy-faced, pudgy-cheeked. He's a slightly sort of piggy actor. And he's, of course, the co-pilot, Weakling Scum, in The Horns of Nimon. But he was in all sorts of things when I was younger. So I was shocked when I saw his name on the cast list in the Doctor Who episode guide in Doctor Who magazine, playing Etnin. There he is, Malcolm Terrace. He also, I think, only died last year. Yes, I think both of these chaps died last year. And Nicolette Pendrell, who's the third one, died some time ago, but her dad, Anthony Pendrell, is in Quatermass in the Pit. So there's the facts on the three short-lived, but they're quite nicely drawn. And Wahed, Etnin, and Talata, I take no credit for this, but they are the numbers 1, 2, and 3 in Arabic, I think. Johnny Morris found that out for a thing. Kenneth Ives is a actor who became a TV director, but he's Hawkeye in Hawkeye the Pathfinder, so he's got good pedigree. Then became a TV director and was married to Marty Kane, who was a great entertainer in this country. This is great. There's a fantastic special effect here to kill poor old. A photograph, at least, of Talata, and the other two have vanished from by her side when she falls over and dies. Don't quite know how that works, but and we haven't seen the Quarks, of course. They are a mysterious presence for now, and all that we know is that they melt ladies' faces. That's a really good effect of sort of oil and water. And we have the first of the arguments between the Dominators about whether one should waste power or not, which becomes something of a recurring theme. It's a very protracted early bit of the TARDIS landing sound. So here we have the TARDIS crew. So they've just been watching Doctor Who. Lucky them. They've just been watched episode 7 of Evil of the Daleks. Lucky things. That's a great. That as part, you actually have as part of the canon the fact that they all sit down and watch Doctor Who. Lucky them, they did something that we can't do. So Zoe's actually only been in it for 5 episodes, hasn't she? So yeah, here we get to one of the things that the whole idea behind this story is that this is a planet of peaceful people, and the writers Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln. Henry Lincoln, as I record this, has died literally this week. A writer I would have loved to have interviewed, but he was not over the moon about Doctor Who and the BBC. And in fact, when we tried to get him for the Web of Fear DVD, it basically stalled when he said, I won't have anything to do with the BBC. Not actually just because this story is obviously that's an excellent shot. Maurice Barry is very good on film and inquiries of getting certainly sort of at distance and composition. And I like the way he uses the Dominator's feet, because that's obviously a slightly forced perspective kind of shot, isn't it? And Kenneth Ives does a good job of sort of stomping about, blowing things up. He has the suggestion is that he's quite a sadist, and that is a drawback. That's an excellent explosion of a spaceship. Look at that. There's quite a lot of fuel flying about there. Yeah, that's a really great explosion, actually. Like that. Isn't that a great Fraser Hines with a beach ball? and so yeah, Henry Lincoln did not want to talk about Doctor Who, although he did do an interview for Doctor Who magazine. I've only just discovered, thanks to Gordon Rutter, who did the interview, that actually he was interviewing about something else and said, while you're here, can I occasionally mention Doctor Who, and sort of cobbled together 3,000 words or whatever. And he's sending us the files, old Gordon, so that's very generous of him. So we at least have Henry Lincoln on record talking about Doctor Who, but we couldn't get him for any of the official releases. But it wasn't necessarily because of this, although this story was a bone of contention between Mervyn Haseman and Henry Lincoln, which is why it is credited to Norman Ashby, which is, I believe, their father-in-law's Christian names stuck together. Because they weren't happy with Derek Sherwin and their relationship with the production team. Now, but I have to say, excuse my oven for beeping. I'm hoping it will stop. It's got some samosas in. Yes, they're very grim. Those statues. And I think, are they... I've got a feeling they might be... Shut up, Oven! I've got a feeling they are actually people. They're extras. They're not dummies. They're actually supporting artists made up to look like dummies. And I've got a feeling there was a hope to maybe use them as living statues on Dulcis as well, that never happened. But they actually, rather than have dummies, they have made up actresses playing the sort of nuclear scarred dummies in the museum. And I think this is all great, by the way, this whole thing of having a sort of nuclear wasteland. And then you've got the mystery, of course, of, well, we're in a nuclear wasteland, but hang on. So we've got this, the initial threat is, oh God, they've been wandering around a nuclear wasteland, they're all going to be soaked in radiation and they're going to die. But actually, no, because the Dominators have landed and they've hoovered up all of the radiation. So that's a great in for the story, I think. And I remember thinking, and every time I see them, I think, why have they got 3 characters? Warhead, Etnin and Talata. That's quite a lot to sort of sacrifice in your initial salvo. You have to pay for 3 actors, and it's not like any of them are particularly distinctive characters. Why you could have just had Cully's best mate or something like that be melted. But it's of course because when they meet Cully later, he says, oh, I came with 3 friends, and they think, it's the TARDIS crew are his 3 friends. So that's actually very carefully placed, the number of Cully's mates mirroring the number of the TARDIS crew, in order that this survey team, Balan and Kando and Teal, underestimate the threat or what is going on, or don't take seriously the Doctor and Jamie and Zoe because they associate them with Cully, and Cully is a rapscallion. So I think that's all sort of carefully placed, which I like, because yes, that's quite funny, because Jamie does. We always like it when Jamie puts his foot in. It goes, "Oh, we come in a TARDIS." Oh, better not say that. But the Doctor interrupts him and gives him that wah wah moment, and then explains it anyway. This is Johnson Bailey, who, when I did this is an early story that I did a DVD commentary for. I had the great pleasure of doing it. It was one of the first ones I did. I think maybe the third. And I was very happy to be part of it. And nobody really knew anything about Johnson Bailey at that point. I've since discovered in my research for the Quatermass book, actually, that he's the son of Katie Johnson, who is Mrs. Wilberforce in The Lady Killers, and also the little old lady in the in episodes of the Quatermass Experiment. So that's his claim to fame, is that he had a famous mum, and this is quite sweet. She's very sweet, isn't she? And yes, so they're being taught they're being taught the dangers of nuclear war, which of course are, very big at the time. They're unfortunately getting pretty big now as well, which teaches us about complacency. So this whole thing about atomic war, and a lot of sort of progressive drama was would tackle this issue. None is, for Doctor Who being the liberal programme. And I remember being furious when Doctor Who magazine did a special where different writers wrote about their takes on each story, and there was a Patrick Troughton special, and there was Gareth Roberts, who's, it's fair to say, somewhat more right-wing than I am, wrote a sort of tract about how, lefty liberals are, foolish, and this story is a great satire of sort of liberal attitudes. And I was young then. I remember being furious with it. How dare Doctor Who magazine be a mouthpiece for right-wing ideas and blah blah blah. As I got older, I have sympathy with that idea, and I don't think that Doctor Who should be there just to confirm my liberal political bias. And I think there is something to be said. I would always still advocate the peaceful way where possible, but I think one has to acknowledge that being wholly peaceful can, you're a bit stuffed if the other people hold no truck with that. And so whereas I thought when I was younger that this was beyond the pale, and a couple of reactionary writers, why how dare you use Doctor Who to have a go at pacifism, I now think it's a perfectly legitimate thing to be doing, even if my sympathies are still slightly mimsy and liberal. But there was obviously, the peace movement was in the air, and a couple of writers go, yeah, okay, but what happens if two big-shouldered sadists come in with their squeaky robots? Then what are you gonna do? I mean, it's. I actually quite like the design here. Ian Marter does brilliantly in the book, doesn't he? Because he makes them sort of creaky, cadaverous, oily creatures. I think who's and sort of tortoise-like, and I mean, they are a little bit tortoise-like. I've never understood the museums in Doctor Who that have fully operable weapons. And you don't go to the Museum of Science and Technology in Manchester and be able to take off in a Spitfire, or I'm sure in various weapons museums there's not a loaded musket or anything, but. I mean, yes. That, as I say, my memory of this is that there's a lot of argument between these two, but there's a deathly sort of stillness about Ronald Allen there, with a slight grimace to the mouth. So he, unlike the sort of sadist Tober, he takes no pleasure in what he does. There's a sort of grim fatalism about an alienness to Ronald Allen that I think is really good, is really interesting. And, you know, the Dulcians here being, you know, credulous is unlogical is quite nice. I mean, I think as the story goes on, you want to shake them a little bit, but it's an attempt to create, an alien society with an attitude. Obviously, where it all falls down is that they spend the whole thing going, but we're from Dulcis, we're very people, the Pilpil of Dulcis. Well, we've gathered the people of the planet Earth don't all have the same views or the same approach, let alone of one particular part of it. You know, we're led to believe this is what the whole planet are like. You know, this is an island. Dulcis isn't a city; it's the planet. I mean, you'd be laughed out of the room if you said the people of Wigan are very good at making wind chimes, but have no truck with queuing. You know, or whatever it is that you'd want to say. Arthur Cox was a nice man who played Cully. I used to occasionally see him on the Piccadilly line, having done the commentary with him, latterly with a moustache. And he's one of the few, the illustrious bevy. I have to be careful, because I think I said in a commentary for the Crotons, I said to Gilbert Winner, you're one of the few actors that's done Doctor Who on Torchwood, a classic Doctor Who in Torchwood. And somebody went, well, actually, there are a few actors, you know, here's a list of actors. And I was like, yeah, I still think there's comparatively few. I think I don't have to be picked up on the word few. You know what I mean? It's just an artful way of drawing attention. It's just better than going, and you are an actor that did Torchwood and Doctor Who. Anyway, he's one of a number of actors to have done classic Doctor Who, Arthur Cox, and new Doctor Who. Now, that's bigger than the actors that have done classic Doctor Who and Torchwood. But Arthur is in a story I've already done for Happy Times and Places, The 11th Hour, as Mr. Henderson. So delightful that, and I think it was pretty much his last part. The last time I saw him on the Piccadilly line, I'd occasionally see him and not speak to him because I didn't pluck up the courage. Then I started to pluck up the courage because I knew I'd have been disappointed if I hadn't. And I said, you know, good to see you in Doctor Who again. And he said, oh yes. He said, yeah. And he said, I've pretty much retired now. But I think I was gigging, and I used to finish on Leicester Square about 10:30, and Wednesday night was the night he'd go to the theatre. So we'd often end up in the same carriage on the same line. But he sadly died. He also died last year. Yeah, it's not been a good couple of years for the people of Dulcis. And again, this is nice that there's that the ship has landed near the TARDIS, because the Doctor and Jamie go check out. That's not Patrick Troughton, of course. Patrick Troughton is not on location for this story, so any shot of the Doctor is not him, which is a great use of resources. But and it is quite fun trying to then spot Chris Jeffries, who definitely should be interviewed at some point if anyone can find him. I wish some of these obscure people of Doctor Who history were called things like Thunderclap McGinty rather than Chris Jeffries, because they would be easier to find. I love the report. I love the way he does this. Stop it, Jamie, and pushes him away and start. And that's a fantastic shot of the Quarks atop a big hill, and then Kenneth Ives' tallness. I think the head design of the Quark is absolutely fantastic. The boxes are quite cute, but I remember seeing pictures of the Quarks, and thinking they looked absolutely magnificent. I don't think they're quite as good in execution, because they totter about a bit, and the voices we will talk about, which I think are generally a good idea, but again don't quite work in execution. Sheila Grant, who's a fantastic radio actress. So that was episode 1 of The Dominators, which I actually think is a really, really good episode. It's setting up. I think the idea that there's this radioactive island, which also has a museum that is a sort of totem plus research project for the effects of radiation and atomic weapons, which gives the story its theme, which is of a race that is scared of nuclear annihilation and so have gone down a peaceful path, and a race who are fueled on nuclear propulsion, but also quite happy to dominate, to walk into any situation and use superior force, and that therefore a peaceful attitude is no match for that. So that, I think that's an interesting dynamic to fly in. But the fact that then the nuclear aspect of it has some practical plot thrust as well, I think is good. And as I say, I think the placing of the 3 characters that get wiped out, and that being 3 characters to mirror the TARDIS crew, and then the fact that the box, the TARDIS, is the site is sited where it is, that brings it into the story, which means that the Doctor and Jameson, the Quark Prince, and that's also where one of the bits of mining equipment later on goes on. So I think it's all very cleverly placed. There's no other story like it either, really, because a lot of the Troughton futuristic ones a lot of Troughton stories, full stop, are set on bases, and they're usually bases on Earth, if a slightly futuristic-y Earth. So there aren't many on alien planets, and those that are, the Macra, it's a human colony, and also it's got the sort of Orwellian cheerfulness thing going on. But there's no real sort of alien planets where there's an alien civilization and alien invaders too. It's a sort of rare mix in that regard. I suppose we have the Gons and the Crotons coming up, but it still feels it is slightly anomalous in the feel to the rest of the Troughton era. So for that, I suppose it should be treasured, even though I think more to my taste is a base with a stroppy commander and that feeling of isolation and being besieged and all of that I do love those stories so much. But that, I thought, had enough in it to be interesting. Maurice Barry is very good on film. I think he films location very well. And the decision not to show the quarks until the end of the episode was interesting. And that's not unusual. I enjoy it when Michael Ferguson does it with the Ice Warriors in The Seeds of Death. So there's no reason not to enjoy it when Maurice Barry does it here. Ronald Allen is great. And I think I've got to pick Ronald Allen at some point. Do I pick him now? Because if I pick him before Andrew does, I get him whenever Andrew picks him. Whereas if Andrew picks him and I haven't picked him, I then can't pick him. But I do think he's... Partially because I think some of the other characters are played by great actors, but they're not the best parts. But I think he brings something special and alien and sort of slightly cruel, but his enjoyment of the cruelty isn't too stark and grotesque. As I say, it has a sort of contained menace and sort of grimacing quality about it. I think, Ronald Allen's the alien quality that he gives to Dominator Rago, I think is even though actually, as we'll discover, there are shortcomings to the characterization, but that's not the actor's fault. I didn't think I was going to choose that for episode 1. I do like the whole there's radiation, but where's the radiation gone? It's been sucked up by the Dominator spaceship. I think that's a really clever piece of plotting. And Andrew is a writer. So I might choose the whole radioactivity thing because that gives us our setting, it gives us the museum, it brings all the characters into it for various reasons. The survey team there who then can info dump on us. I think that's all quite smartly done. So yeah, actually I'm going to do the radioactivity and what it brings to the plot and the storytelling, and the fact, of course, it's hugely resonant for the time. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, quite resonant for our times as well. But we continue, we carry on. So, radioactivity and all it brings to the episode. And what does Andrew Smith, writer of Full Circle, think is the best thing about episode 1?
Okay, so that was episode 1 of The Dominators. It's time to pick my favourite thing, and my favourite thing in that was the appearance of the Quarks right at the end there. A real nostalgia rush, a nostalgia-gasm, if you will, when they appear. So etched into my memory, such a part of Doctor Who, such a part of my childhood, really. To finally see the Quarks on screen, the little bubbly voice, the pointy head, those arms extending. And they were such a part of Doctor Who for me because not only were they in the serial, but they were also ubiquitous in the comics at the time, in TV comic strips. So I saw plenty of them beyond this story, but it's marvellous, and I can well remember watching it when it came out on VHS and seeing them after so many years again for the first time on screen, and it comes right back to me every time I see them. I'm taken right back to being 6 years old. So yeah, my favourite thing from episode 1 is the appearance of the Quarks.
I suppose I should have anticipated that. And it is a great end to the episode. I love the way that you have the two of them on that mound, that hill. It's a hill. It's like a mountain. It's massive, and it's a really smart piece of direction to then have the taller Dominator come and stand in the middle. It's a beautiful piece of composition, and actually just the colouring of the jet black sort of arms and legs of Toba also gives him a contrast as well. So it's the whole incongruity that is sort of striking and interesting. And I do like the design of the Quarks. But I'm sure we'll talk about them a lot. And Maurice Barry shoots so beautifully on film for Tomb of the Cybermen. It's no surprise to see that he does all sorts of great things with the shapes and sizes of the landscape. Okay, so I didn't get a point for that, but I did enjoy episode 1 of The Dominators because I don't think I've ever watched it in sort of pieces. Oh, I suppose I did when I did Running Through Corridors, but I remember not having a great time watching it with Running Through Corridors when I did it with Rob. I think it was when Rob and I started to struggle with the Troughton era a bit, but because I haven't watched any Troughton for ages, I actually found that an intriguing premise. It's a good idea. It's actually got something to say and wants to talk about something, even though, it is that the writers do come across as sort of slightly fulminating men in tweed at a dinner party going, "Are these young people with their peace?" But as I say, as I get older, part of me goes, and I've got, young sons who are as idealistic as I was when I was younger, and I found myself in that position that I thought I would never be in, of going, well, yes, your idealism is all very well and good, but half a mo. It still doesn't mean I'm not a weedy and probably not very sensible liberal, and would always sometimes fly in the face of a more pragmatic argument. But I don't know, because I think of some magical part of humanity that must win out. I'm less rejecting of the idea that you can use Doctor Who to explore this idea. Now, I don't think we'll see how they explore it. As I say, maybe that was a bias of mine coming into it every time I watched it, of going, well, I don't really like the politics of this story either. I actually think it set up a very interesting conundrum. And not facetiously, it's got the radioactivity and all of that going on. So I thought that was an interesting and pretty well mounted episode. There are some production flaws, as I say. Some of the segues between, or the mixing between model shots was. I don't think had too much thought put into it, or had a sort of sense of that'll do. I don't know. So how do I feel? How do we feel about the fact that spaceship's sort of all glowing, and then when it's landing, it's not, and it's grayscale rather than sort of translucenty whitey. But maybe that's it entering the atmosphere, and that's what that is. In which case I kind of like it. I don't know. I just think the fact that it sort of fades from one to the other, and there's no attempt to sort of match it up. Well, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how you feel about that. But anyway, we'll throw that in there as. And then there is that really odd move between the sort of slightly out of focus Misty Mountains onto the landing of Cully and Co.'s craft. Oh, but then there's that wonderful special effect where Talata gets terped. Anyway, yes, plenty in there, plenty to talk about. Certainly not. I think I've just always found it quite a boring story. But when I'm having to concentrate on the minutiae and on an episode by episode basis, I'm very happy at the moment with the Dominators. So I hope you are too. But I think. Shall I destroy episode 1? No. Let's. I'm glad that it remains in the archive for us still to enjoy. So until next time, thanks very much for watching, and hey, peace. Well, thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke. My guest this time around is Andrew Smith, Doctor Who writer, who can be found on Twitter at Andrew Smith, capital A, capital S, but the E of Andrew is a 3, so it's at Andrew3 Smith. Yeah, have a look. As I say, I'd like to thank him. I would also like to thank the many patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, Ronald Hayden, Rob Leonard, the glory-hungry Christopher Meredith, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Nick Tedston, David and Jenny at Blue Box 99, and Paul Carrington. The music is by Dave Gates and the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to join that list of names, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, where for £3 a month you can support my endeavours and as a result get bonus material, exclusive releases, early releases. Oh, they're so far ahead. I mean, they're listening to this 6 months before you are. And as I say, £3 a month is the starting tier. They go up all the way to, well, I mean, whatever you like, but let's not get into that, because I've just listened back to my outro to the Power of Crowell episode 2, and it went on forever. So, patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Tiers, you could sign up for a year in one go and get a 10% discount, yada, 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 yada. I appreciate any support, which can also be given on kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, which doesn't oblige you to sign up for the monthly thing. Oblige. You know what I mean. And I'm also a stand-up comic, and I do stand-up comedy once a week at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club in Manchester, 8 p.m. every Tuesday. That has a Twitter feed, Excess, the letter X, the letter S, Malarkey, at Excess Malarkey. You can follow me on Twitter at Toby Hadoke, and these podcasts have their own feed at Hadoke Podcasts. I would be grateful if you could support any or all of those endeavours. Excess Malarkey Comedy Club can also be found online at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey, which has a few examples of the online shows we did during the pandemic, which we continue to do once a month at 8 p.m. on the first Sunday of every month, with me, with special guests from around the comedy world. In between stints of recording these, I've been watching Bergerac on BritBox, and I have to say, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Oh, you see all sorts. Ian Marter pops up as a cowman, I think he's credited as, in an episode that's got Lisa Goddard as a saucy diamond thief. She turns up 3 times, and all her episodes, by the way, are written by Rod Beecham, who plays Corporal Lane in The Web of Fear. But, I mean, all sorts of Doctor Who. If there's not an episode that's got 3 or 4 Doctor Who character actor types popping up, then I mean, Mary Tam is in one, and she's below, on the credits, she's below Mestor, Herrick from Underworld, and Severin the Lovely Muto from Genesis of the Daleks, who is also Arak, the grumpy television viewer in Vengeance on Varos, and he's a bit of a slimy villain in Bergerac, more akin to his nasty turn in Howard's Way. I'm talking, of course, of the glorious Stephen Yardley. But look, I tell you what, I have a character actor-gasm every time I put my feet up and watch an old episode of Bergerac. So I thought I would have... Oh, and actually, Arthur Cox Cully has turned up in one that I watched recently. Who else was in that one? That was one with quite a good cast. Who was in that one? Oh, I can't remember now. But yeah, Arthur. I did quite a decent part in it as somebody who Jim Bergerac was very unkeen to investigate the robbery of. Oh yeah, that one's got Michelle Collins from 42, and of course Cindy Beale in EastEnders, and Cassia from the Keeper of Traken. Yeah, glorious, good stuff. So yes, Bergerac, please, and it's about time John Nettles turned up in a Doctor Who. Let's hope he's in the 60th anniversary as a detective. No, not as a detective in a classic car. There's more to him than that. Let's not typecast John Nettles. I want him to be a cruel alien or a interplanetary bureaucrat. But yeah, it's about time Nettles did a Bergerac. Anyway, I'm aware that the running times of these episodes are getting longer because of the protracted waffle I do at the end of them. I kind of think, because a couple of people have encouraged me, you know who you are, we listen right to the end. It's now made me, I think, overcompensate for those little morsels of affirmation that I got, and everybody else has to suffer, myself included. So I'm going to stop now.